Hello there, Star Wars toy fans. This is Jim. Thanks again for taking the time to stop by my channel. Today's video might bring the wrath and ire among several Star Wars collectors because I have modified a ship. Heavily modified a ship. This is the 1999 Tatooine Skiff produced by Hasbro. It is not the vintage 1985 one. I do not own that one. It's one of 8 pieces from the Vintage Kinder collection that I do not have. Would I like to have it? Of course. But this one is a superb substitute, and so I don't feel like I'm not in great need to get it. But it would be cool if I were to eventually get one. And you can see here, there's the stamp there from 1999 Hasbro. So when I picked this ship up many months ago, and if you look back through my videos, you'll see that I did one comparing the 2018 Skiff to this one, which I love both of them, by the way. The trap door here would not stay down or pop open. I don't remember which. It didn't work properly. And the landing gear kept flopping and kept collapsing. So I had to make some modifications to it right off the get-go. So that meant taking the whole thing apart. So the first thing that I did was I added an extra piece of styrene plastic right there, so that way this latch would catch. And the next thing that I did was I added a finish nail right here, or just a little pin nail, so that way the landing gear would not fold back on themselves. That was it. That was only it. What led to the further modifications? A couple weeks ago, my son and I were playing with both skiffs and the sand crawler, just having a blast, and the figures kept falling over every time we'd move this thing. And Kenner was great for playability and putting lots of pegs on things. And so I thought, well, I'm going to put some pegs on it. And I hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. Should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? And I thought, well, I've already modified it. Let's just go ahead and do it. So the first thing I did was to take it apart, like I did before. So if you're going to do this, there are 5 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you have to take out. That's it. And the bottom piece comes out. And then the next thing I did was I decided to mark off all of where the pegs would go. So I went online and I found a picture of the skiff that Luke was on. And figured, okay, so there's 8 figures on there. So we got Han Solo, Chewbacca, there's a Weequay here, there's another Weequay there. Lando, there's like a character similar to Barada, and then another Weequay. Maybe they're mixed up. I've got the order off. And then I put a peg back here for Nikto. So all in all, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pegs. Okay, so I marked those off where I needed to put them. And then what I did was, and by the way, if you're going to do this, make sure you have both the fore and aft pieces there, so that way you know the figure is going to fit within that space. And then went underneath to make sure that I wasn't going through anything major, that I wasn't going to hit anything detrimental to the whole mechanism. So what I did was, as I went to the Imperial Attack Base and measured the height from how tall they needed to be, which I believe it was something like 5/32, maybe between 5 to 6/32 of an inch. And so based on that and the entire length all the way through, I figured it was going to be 3/8 of an inch total length. Once that was figured out, then it was just a matter of drilling the holes for 1/8 of an inch. So you can step it up your drill bits, depending on if maybe you want to go 1/16. Ultimately, you're going to get to 1/8. Now, do not use a Dremel for your final one. You'll melt the plastic, it'll wallow it out, and you won't be able to use the pegs that you had originally designed it for. Always use a pin vise and get the proper drill bit. 1/8 inch bits are easy to find. This is an extra long one that I've picked up, but always use a pin vise when you're drilling through plastic for your final drill. So then I just cut off the piece, did a test fit on it, and once that was fine, then I began the rounding off process. So with these, of course, you're going to cut it flat, You can go down to Target or any other store that sells nail files and just round it off. It doesn't take long. It takes probably all of about, 10, 15, 20 seconds to do it right. And then take a smoother one. These have 2 different size grits on it, and just round it off. And when you look at this, you'll see the final product. See how those are kind of rounded off at the top? That's what you want. So that way it goes into the foot really easily. Now you're going to need a couple more materials to make this happen. Well, this is 1/8 solid rod made by Evergreen Plastics. You can get that online, Amazon, or local hobby store. You're going to need some liquid cement, so that way it melts it to the plastic. Now, word of advice here: there are different types of plastics that Kenner and Hasbro have used. Some are harder plastics, some are softer. So the body here is styrene plastic. Had this been a softer ABS plastic, I would not have been able to use that. So, like for instance, the hole here, or the nose, this is a softer plastic, as is this piece back here. So the styrene rod will glue to this. It will not glue to this softer plastic at all. It'll just come right off. So don't even try. So once you get that set, glue it in place, and then right after you've done the glue, take a wood burner. Now this is a wood burner that I picked up many, many years ago, and I've got several different spades that are tips that unscrew, and this happens to be a flat spade tip. So once you get that in place, and you take your ruler and you set the right height, and I think it was like 5/32 above, then what you do is you take your spade and you just smush it down. Be careful where you're reaching so that way you don't cross over into the support structure of it. And I just smushed down where all 8 of them were. And you may look at that and say, well, wait a minute, this is in the way of that mechanism. Well, yeah, it is, but you can just move that out of the way. And then you need to make sure that it's going to clear that. Okay. And I painted over all these just because I wanted to. So once the pegs were in place, then I did a test fit to make sure that everything worked. So I've got a couple figures here. So I'll put burrata here on that one. And we'll put the weak way here. And you'll see that that they, it works really, really nicely. Then what you do is you have to find some paints and mix and match and figure out what works for you. Now I'm going to turn the camera up, and this is where I have all my paints. I have a lot of paints. Years and years of modeling. I have a lot of paints. So these are all my greens and blues, and these are all my grays and whites and blacks. And then up here I have my lacquers by Ambroid Pro Weld and my browns. And then over here I have my reds, and some more blues, and then all the metallics, and then yellows, and then some miscellaneous stuff up top. These are just basically spice racks, and so it kind of lowers down if I need it to do so. Those are my extra brushes. And then, of course, this is where I have all my tools, the files, and then I have a paint caddy from my childhood. So you want to have all sorts of different colors on hand if you're going to do this. And I used a mixture of olive drab, that was Model Master, which, by the way, they're no longer in production, and then some flat yellow. And just mixed it to where I got the right color. Now, once you get that done, and if you're just going to do the pegs, great, you just touch it up. Then take some of this stuff here. This is Krylon Clear Coat, flat, crystal clear, and that'll seal everything up. Even if you decide to repaint some of your old figures, this will seal it up. You won't have the sticky residue on it. And then that protects it. So now when I put my figures on it, it's not going to take off the paint. Let it sit and cure for a bit. Okay. Now, I ended up doing quite a bit of fine detail work on this, and when I went to look at the movie stills, this was really the only thing I could tell is that this was a different color, and of course this was a different color, and of course they didn't have these levers here, but nonetheless I tried to put a little bit of detail into it, and I think it looks just fine. And then did some weathering detail. I have a Pache airbrush, a dual action airbrush that I use on this. And then I decided to do some on the underside of the ship, as you saw earlier, and did some weathering pretty much around where the recesses are. And then this is the blacks to signify where the engines are blowing back. And then I did some dry brush, so just some light scratch marks, as you'll see that within the movie itself. Okay, so now let's go back and do the reassembly. So we have the top and bottom portion of the hull. We have the nose. We have the back gates. We have the side gates here. Of course, we have the landing gear feet, the 3 of those. You have this backing plate that supports the action for the steering fins. And then, of course, you have this piece for the steering fins, and then the fins on the back. So let's go ahead and reassemble this whole thing. The only thing that you really have to worry about when you put this back is the spring for the trap door. So the first thing that we're going to do is we've got this piece already in place. Now, incidentally, I mentioned that the glue will not adhere to the plastic. So you're going to have to glue this one from underneath. And so that means that this piece is going to become kind of a permanent fixture, if you will. So we're going to put this piece right underneath, and notice that it's got 2 little dowels to line up with. Okay, so we're going to put that right in. Now we're going to put in the tail piece. Okay, and this is going to have to go down like so. Okay, so you can see how that's going to fit. Now we're going to put everything back together. Now the trick is with this little spring. Okay. All right, now it sets back nicely. Everything is flush. Okay, now this spring here, you're going to have to get to set underneath this little tab. So what I'm going to do is slightly lift that up, and then I'm going to take a screwdriver and pry that under there. Okay, now I don't know if you can see right there, but there's a spring underneath this tab. That's critical. Otherwise, otherwise this trap door is not going to move. See how that snaps open? That's exactly what you want to have happen. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw down these center screws. Now there are 5 screws, as I explained earlier, 2 shorter and 3 longer ones. So the shorter ones are the ones that you want to drop here in the center. Now they're Phillips screwdrivers, and I happen to have one that I use as an adjusting screwdriver for my sonic land speeder that I have up on my shelf. Just a regular standard slotted screwdriver. Don't over tighten these screws, otherwise your plastic will be stripped out, and you'll have to try to fill that in. That's an even bigger headache. Alright, so once we get those done, then it's up to you what you want to assemble after that. So we can, if we assemble the back piece, and this one is the one I notice is the most challenging to get lined up. So we have these 2 holes that are going to line up with the screws. Now this is the one that is in there right now. So I'm going to back that one off. Oops. There we are. We'll go ahead and reassemble that. Okay, I paused the video there just to get that one in, because he's kind of a pain to do. Put this one in. This one works pretty well. One thing that I have learned from working on enough machinery is that you just want to get it, if you have 2 screws, get one fairly snug, don't tighten it all the way down, then get the other one in, and then then snug them all down. Okay, so now this is all good to go. Now let's do the front portion. You'll see all these little there's 6 dowel pins. They go into these 6 holes. And then your center screw is right there. And go ahead and put that in. Okay, now we're ready for all the accessories. Now the railings, they're identical. They have this little piece, that triangular piece that sticks out, and then they have these little pins on either side. So you just gently snap that into place. And they already had weathering on it. So did the front, so did the back. It was just the center portion and the bottom that really didn't have any weathering. So I didn't even bother touching the top, or touching those ends. Now these are kind of tricky to get in. You want to be rather careful with this if you decide to disassemble this. So I'm going to assemble this first, and what I'm going to do is to make sure that I support it. Even though it is soft plastic, I don't need this to snap. So I'm going to be pressing then in, holding on the top and bottom of that little, I'm going to call that a thimble, and press in like so. There we go. And then you can put the ball joint in to the fin. Now we're going to do the other side just the same way. There we go. Okay. Now let's make sure that this lever does the plank. Now we're going to put the feet in. And so with these feet, they are going to go out like so. It's got a little clip. That's the center one. Just snaps into place. And then your center one is going to go forward like so. Okay. Oops, I got it backwards. There we go. So it should look like that. Now we have our skiff. And you'll see here that it works really nicely. So we move that. Everything, landing gear pops up. Pull that back, and that little pin keeps the landing gear from retracting itself. Alright, so here we have all the figures standing on there, and do the tip test, and you'll see they all stay on pretty darn well. Now the only peg that I wasn't really able to alter were these here out on the edge, and that's because they're made of that soft plastic. So if we're going to get Luke on there, and this peg was pretty close to the original, but not quite, we can bring that out a little bit further, and then we can put Luke on the outside, and he's supposed to be on the very edge in order to drop off. But there we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you have not been there, or have not done so. We'll see you on a future video.